right, this is lesson 8.4 on page 146. And again, it is mostly review. We learned about restrictive and non-restrictive clauses at the very beginning of the year, so you might have forgotten the information. At the top of 146, it defines a restrictive clause. And basically, restrictive means that it is necessary to the sentence. You need it. If you do not have that clause in the sentence, then the sentence doesn't make sense. And non-restrictive is just the opposite. You don't need it. It's extra information. And if you were to take it out, the sentence would still make sense. Non-restrictive clauses are set off with commas. And here's an example. Zach, who is my older brother, just bought a new car. So if you took out who is my older brother and read the sentence Zach just bought a new car, it would make sense. So that's why the clause is non-restrictive. The car that he bought is a BMW. I highlighted the restrictive clause there. That he bought is essential to the sentence. You need to know specifically which car. The car that he bought is a BMW. Sometimes it looks like you could take that out. The car is a BMW, but I'm talking specifically about the one that he bought. So that's why it is restrictive. It's necessary to the sentence. It's more specific, okay? Restrictive and non-restrictive clauses start with relative pronouns. So they give you a bunch of examples on that page if you want to pause the video and read those, quiz yourself. And then at the bottom it says, note the following characteristics about these adjective clauses. A non-restrictive is set off with commas. Restrictive does not have commas. A proper noun is usually followed by a non-restrictive clause. So Zach, he's a proper noun. He is a specific person, right? And then a non-restrictive clause follows. So a lot of proper nouns are used before a non-restrictive clause. And then it says the relative pronoun that is generally used for restrictive. So anytime you see the word that in a sentence, a light bulb should go off in your head. This is probably a restrictive clause. And which is used for non-restrictive clauses typically. But it's really any other relative pronoun like who, whose, which, what, right? So exercise 1, I'm going to do 1 through 4 on page 146. It says identify the adjective clause in each sentence. Tell whether the adjective clause is restrictive or non-restrictive. So number 1, the Colosseum, which is one of the most famous buildings in the world, stands in central Rome. So that has a non-restrictive clause, which is one of the most famous buildings in the world. And I know that because it's set off with commas and it starts with the word which. Number 2, it is a magnificent monument that was left by the ancient Romans. That was left by the ancient Romans. It doesn't have a comma and it is restrictive. Number 3, the Romans, whose skill at building was famous, created a great empire. So that one has commas, so I know it's non-restrictive, and it's whose skill at building was famous. It's kind of a weird sentence. And number 4, oops, I already put the answer up there. It says, Roman structures that are still standing include amphitheaters, aqueducts, arches, and roadways. So that are still standing and it doesn't have commas and therefore it is restrictive. Your job is to do exercise 2 on Google Classroom. Please let me know if you have any questions at all.